The time has almost come for New York Jets head coach Robert Saleh to get to cooking. Joe Douglas got him the ingredients. Saleh's got to get the results. I'm Glenn Norton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Not sure how many of you caught this, but in the past week, 2-3 weeks, whatever it is, there have been some polls coming out done, ESPN reportedly polling NFL executives behind the scenes to get a feel for, who do you think is the top 10 players at each position in the NFL. I don't mind this. I don't mind that it's anonymous because, you're not going to get a lot of team executives to come out publicly and say that a division rival is better. Like, yeah, this guy is better than our guy. That just doesn't happen in today's NFL. Everyone has to swear that everyone they have is the guy and the right guy and the most committed guy, and everyone loves everyone and all that stuff. So if you ask them to say it publicly, you're not going to get real answers. Ask them behind closed doors, quietly. Someone they might say, "Look, yeah, Breece Hall's better than Raheem Mostert." And I mentioned Breece because he popped up on the first list that came out, like I said, a week or two ago. Breece Hall was the first position that they was running backs. Breece Hall, number 2 in the NFL. That surprised even me. If you missed it, myself, Dylan Terriman, Chris Schubert, we did a top 25. We ranked the top 25 players on the Jets roster. I believe me and Dylan both had Breece at 3, and Chris may have had him at 4, but even said the next day he may have bumped him up. So I think we all had Sauce 1. They had Sauce 1. I had Quinnen 1. And then I had Sauce 2, and they had Quinnen 2. And then 3, again, Dylan and I had Breece Hall. Breece Hall's a monster. I don't know how many. It's one thing that's funny. I'm not someone who generally worries about what other teams think or what other fans think about the Jets. I don't care. Like when they're bad, I admit they're bad. I'm not sort of living in any fantasy world. But the number of fans who legitimately don't seem to think this Jets team has any talent. If they stay healthy, these folks are going to be in for a rude awakening. Now, look, everybody gets hurt and they're going to suck again. I get that. But if they're healthy, they're like, I don't think these people realize how good Breece Hall is. But Breece was number 2, according to the NFL execs. Then the next list that came out, I think it was the next one, was DTs, defensive tackles. Quinnen Williams came in 2 to Chris Jones. Christian McCaffrey, by the way, won at running back. No surprise there. And now today, the quarterback list comes out. Aaron Rodgers. And this surprised me, honestly. I mean, Rodgers didn't play last year, didn't play his best football the year before that. I think there were a lot of people that had him in the sort of 12 to 15 range, which I'm not saying is justified. I'm just saying this is the reality of, missing time. You miss enough time where you're not on the field and you're coming off of your worst year and you're coming off of an injury. Some people are going to have some doubts, and that's understandable. I don't have a problem with that. But they ranked him 8. Aaron Rodgers, number 8 in the top 10. And I'm trying to find so the full list for quarterbacks: Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, which I don't know. Josh Allen's a phenomenal player. I don't think for some reason people ignore his turnovers. He turns it over a lot too much to be top 3 in my opinion. But listen, it's splitting. He's a great player no matter what. I think he just turns it over too much. Lamar Jackson, Matthew Stafford, Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud, 7, had a great year. I mean, yeah, he's a rookie. He's got to prove he can do it, but just going off of what he's done, you want to put him 7, that's fine. Aaron Rodgers, 8, Jared Goff, 9, Dak Prescott, 10. Honorable mentions: Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, Tua, Cousins, and Trevor Lawrence. That's a surprising one. Trevor Lawrence in the top 10. But you've basically got a roster, right? And if you look, you've got this polling coming out. Tyron Smith was an honorable mention on the tackles, and we all know if he'd been healthy the last couple of years, he'd be top 3. So from a talent perspective, he's one of the best ever to do it, and certainly top 3, top 5 at worst if he's a full go. But I understand, people are looking at his durability and holding that against him a little bit. And I think we did that a little in our rankings, really. I forget where I had him in our 1 to 25, but he'd be top 5 if there were no questions about his injury status. So you look at these rankings that came out again. It was, I believe it was ESPN. And then you've got, how are we doing, Dano? Thanks for joining in. So you look at that. You look then PFF. recently. Again, I feel like PFF should part of their name should be take it with a grain of salt, right? Because we all know there are questions there. But PFF graded the Jets as having the best linebacker tandem in the NFL in Mosley and Quincy Williams. They graded them as the best corner trio in the NFL, which is 100% deserved. There's not another trio out there like them. And I think their O-line group, I think they graded in the top 5. I forget. I was looking at that earlier today. Folks may not want to admit this, but Robert Saleh, I mean, to say there are no excuses this year is the understatement of all understatements. This is a roster that has some weaknesses or some question marks, as every roster in the NFL does. Nobody's got a top 5 guy at every spot. But when you look at it, this isn't Homer Jets fans just blathering on about a roster because you've added 1 or 2 players. These are, despite what former NFL players say, there is no Jets bias in the media, and at least not in a positive light. The Jets are generally a punching bag. They're an easy punching bag, and they're a desirable punching bag because if you're gonna write negative headlines because negativity sells, you're gonna want to do it about a team in a major market with a large fan base because hey, look, it increases the opportunity to get people riled up, to get people angry, to get people to click. What was it the other day? Mark Schlereth ripped the Jets, and Schlereth does that. But Schlereth is a guy who likes to stir the pot. You remember he ripped Eric Decker back in the day. He's saying, Aaron Rodgers doesn't belong at the big boy table in the conversation about the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He knows he's lying. He knows that's not true. But he also knows it generated a lot of conversation. And it will because Schlereth was an incredible player. Multiple time Super Bowl winner, elite offensive lineman. So his opinion carries weight with a lot of fans. And even more with fans who don't realize the game he's a part of. Like he's moved from one game to another. He moved from being on the field to being in the commentator box, or whatever you want to call it, the booth, the box. He's a guy whose job it is to get people to click and go, hey, what did he say? What did Mark Schlereth say today? So that's why you come out and you say things like Aaron Rodgers doesn't belong to the big boy table. Top 5 quarterback of all time. I mean, are we going to say Dan Marino doesn't belong to the big boy table? I would say he does, and Trent Dilfer does, but or he gets a seat before Dan Marino does. I don't think so. Look, rings are important, but we can't ignore the fact that there are other things that impact the ring other than the quarterback. It is the biggest factor, yes, of course. But Aaron Rodgers played on some teams that didn't invest a lot on offense and asked him to do everything. And we know, the botched special teams play that cost him a playoff game and a trip to the Super Bowl. So it hasn't been all about Aaron Rodgers, and that was something pointed out and accurately by Dan Leberfeld of Jets Confidential. Charles says Breece is a game changer. The Jets need to rely more on Breece Hall, and I think they will. I think the ground game. It's going to be interesting to see how the Jets go about this because I figured with the way they were rebuilding the O-line, the fact they seem to be getting personnel who would be more suited for a power scheme, that they were going to be a little more ground and pound than people realized. We got Aaron Rodgers. They're going to throw it 40, 50 times a week. I'm not 100% sure they do that. And when they do throw it, I think a lot of the throws, and this is just what we've seen from Aaron Rodgers over the years, a lot of times what the Packers did with Rodgers, and I imagine the Jets will do the same, use the short passing game to supplement the running game, right? The quick hitters, the tunnel screens, the receiver screens, and just doing stuff, a ton of stuff behind the line of scrimmage, giving guys a chance to make plays, high percentage completions. So there'll probably be a fair bit of that. But if you combine the short game, the passes around the line and the run game, I don't think this team's going to be airing it out the way a lot of folks are expecting, just because of the fact that you've got Aaron Rodgers under center now. But I think Robert Saleh, and I said this last year, and it applies even more now. The talent is such that he's not in any position to not win double-digit games. You can't have, and people can say, all this is on paper, which it is, of course. Look, the games haven't started, right? I never understand that. I never understand when fans spend the offseason saying, prove it on the field, prove it on the field. You got to wait till the games start. And from the time that the last game of the season is played to the time the first game of the next season is played, are we going to not talk about football? Are we just going to say, well, nothing to be done on the field, so let's not talk about the offseason? This is what we do. We love the game. You love the team. You sit down, you look at the offseason plan, what you think they should do, what the team actually does, how you think it's worked out, what moves you think will work, what moves you think won't work. This is what we do. So people get aggravated. You know, literally, people get mad when I say, I think Joe Douglas done a good job, put a good roster together. Prove it on the field. Oh, okay. How about we wait till the games start? And then they'll do that. I'm almost certain that's the plan. But they can't do that right now. They will be doing it soon, though. Only a couple weeks till training camp. Dano, let's see, Finns fans clinging to that. And once we're on the field, they'll realize the passing of the torch. Listen, I hope like hell. I believe they will. Again, it's all down to health. And for Miami too, right? Tua will always be a question mark. And you can even say Rodgers at this point is a question mark, right? And I have no problem with that. 41 coming off a major injury. So yeah, both teams have question marks, but if they're fully healthy, I'll tell you the one place where Miami does have the edge, coaching, right? That's why I started at the top saying about Robert Saleh. This is where Saleh's got to get the most out of his team. Otherwise, as much as we talk about, and I'm not going to get into it now, but the number of people that say like, oh, if they don't win this year, clean house, everybody's gone. I'm not convinced. I think if Woody Johnson is humble enough to realize he's not an X's and O's football guy, but if he looks at what current coaches, former coaches, executives, again, these polls from execs, this is a very talented roster. The general manager has done his job. That is the general manager's job, is to acquire talent, enough talent to win. This team undoubtedly has enough talent to win. Again, now that all changes if every single risk Joe Douglas has taken, because he has taken some risks. Let's not let that get lost in all of this. If significant guys or major guys get hurt and the depth pieces you've brought in behind them fail, then fine, you can't defend Joe Douglas. However, if they stay relatively healthy, mostly healthy, and they still don't make the playoffs or make a playoff push, that's not on Joe Douglas. You can, and I've had this conversation with people, right? There are people out there, and we know this, we've talked about it. There are people who dislike Joe Douglas enough that they can find a way to blame him for everything. As I said the other day, I've seen a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot. I've seen a surprising number of people criticize him for the Izzy Abanikanda pick. And I just think to myself, this is a fifth-round player. Most of those guys don't make rosters. And I love Izzy. And I'm still holding on to hope that he makes the roster. But the second they drafted 2 running backs, a lot of people, and maybe they'll be right, we'll find out in time, but a lot of people thought that shuts the door on Izzy. He's gone. He's not on the team anymore. This is another blown draft pick by Joe Douglas. First of all, he's not off the team yet. I'm not saying he won't be, but let's let this play out first, because there is the possibility. I wrote an article the other day for JetNation.com saying that maybe Isaiah Davis was legitimately brought in to be a special teamer, right? We mentioned the piece that appeared on NewYorkJets.com, where they broke down, they went through every single draft pick and gave some backstory and a little background on every guy they drafted, speaking to people inside the building, people who were involved in the process. And the thing that jumped out to me about Isaiah Davis was that the conversation around him was almost exclusively, when it got to the conversations Brant Boyer was having with scouts leading up to the draft, the conversation was about him as a special teams player. And when the Jets drafted him, they said he's a guy that we plan to utilize, or they mentioned him as a potential return man with the new kickoff return rule, which we've heard teams say that you're going to see sort of maybe some bigger, more physical guys returning kicks than you have in years past. Isaiah Davis would fit that mold. So it could be Isaiah Davis is going to be a do-it-all special teams guy, And maybe Izzy's your RB3. Because, I always talk about how every team every year has a few guys, a handful of guys who don't really see the field on offense and defense, but they stay on the roster because they're really good special teamers. Now, who's to say that's not Isaiah Davis this year? I'm not. I think too much of Izzy Abanikanda, and from what we've heard from inside the building, throughout the offseason, some of the guys who cover the team, some of the beat writers have talked about how high they are in Izzy, and this isn't post draft. This is weeks before the draft. So I'm not here to say Izzy Abanikanda is absolutely making the roster. I'm saying I think it's silly to assume he won't at this point. And even if he doesn't, I don't feel like missing on a 5th round running back is worthy of crying about, because day 3 guys generally don't make rosters. Dylan Terraman and I did a show a couple months ago where we broke down every single Joe Douglas draft pick, and I kind of started the show off by going through the numbers, like what percentage of guys drafted by all teams across the NFL over the past couple of decades. And I cited the article, and there was an article on it where they went down and they broke down, starting players, backup players, guys who were useless, guys who were out of the league almost immediately. And when you add the numbers up, about 50, I think it was 52, 53% of guys, and this sort of coincides, I've talked about years ago about how, I remember listening to retired GM, I forget who, they were doing the Serious Drive Time show with Pat Kerwin, and they were talking about draft hits and misses and rates. And it was right in that sort of, it's just over 50% of NFL draft picks fail. I think it's like 52, 53% of picks are flops. So when people flip out because a 5th round running back doesn't make it, it's like, what are we doing? It's the very definition of just seeking. I mean, we all know somebody in our lives who looks for reasons to be unhappy. And you're probably one of those people if you're getting upset over a day 3 pick, potentially not making a roster. Hasn't even failed to make a roster yet. Just might fail to make a roster. So the talent's there. At quarterback, listen, God forbid Rodgers misses any time. Tyrod Taylor's fine for a few games. If you're going to miss significant time, Tyrod Taylor's got some injury concerns. We had that conversation on our show a few weeks ago. Should the Jets be considering a 4th quarterback? Because Jordan Travis, rookie, you don't want to hand the season over to him, or you don't want to hand the team over to him for a 4 or 5 game stretch if you need a couple of wins. Tyrod Taylor, again, he's got the injury history. Aaron Rodgers coming off the injury. Again, there are some questions. And if there are major injuries at important positions where the depth either isn't good enough to backfill, or the depth you get injuries there, then there might be some more conversations about this team. But what Robert Saleh has been gifted by this front office is an absolutely loaded roster. There will, one question that we've discussed briefly, maybe in my mind, even having said with PFF saying that, Mosley and Quincy Williams are the number 1 linebacker duo in the NFL. I'm not saying they're not deserving of that. I wonder how much longer CJ Mosley can play at that level with his age, with the miles he has. And it's you kind of wonder, is there a chance that the time Mosley missed due to COVID and injury, did that give him a couple of years off for his body to recover and recuperate in a way that it generally wouldn't for an NFL player, especially the COVID year where he was healthy? Getting to just sit down for a year, let your body fully recuperate from the year. Because, I mean, look, he's played a lot of reps. He played a lot of reps in Baltimore. And then, of course, with the Jets, he goes out right away, misses a full season. Then he misses the following season. It's just going to allow him to play at a little bit higher level than he may have been able to at his age had he had the 1,000 reps a year each of those 2 years that he missed. We'll see, but that's something that Robert Saleh is going to have to plan for. And I've talked about, I think Jamie and Sherwood, I think he's a really good player. I think he's a guy who probably takes over when CJ Mosley goes out. When CJ Mosley moves on. Unless draft time comes and the Jets feel like they can get a stud, monster linebacker to replace Mosley, that might be an option. But I think Jamie and Sherwood, they're pretty comfortable with him coming in off the bench to fill in, and I think they absolutely should be. Infrared Jet says, I know it's only Brownlee's 2nd season, but do you think he can give us 500 to 700 yards with 4 or 5 touchdowns if utilized correctly? Listen, you go back pre-draft last year, Infrared Jets, and I was a big Brownlee fan leading up to the draft. Named him as a guy the Jets should keep an eye on at the combine. I think he absolutely can be, but the two things that are gonna have the biggest impact on how well or how much Brownlee does is A, do they give him a real shot? Because I think if you have a fair competition between him and Alan Lazard, with if Mike Williams isn't ready week one, I think Brownlee is a guy who would have a chance to beat out Alan Lazard. However, with the relationship Rodgers and Lazard have, that's going to be a little tougher unless if Lazard keeps dropping the ball. I said this when the Jets signed Alan Lazard. I understood he was probably the best free agent receiver on the market. It just wasn't a very deep class. And I understood the history with Rodgers. So I got why they did it. I wasn't going to rip him for it. But I did kind of laugh when I went back and looked at his drop numbers because everyone's like, oh, thank God. Now he can take over for Corey Davis. And, Corey Davis has terrible hands. Lazard's drop rate was higher than Corey Davis over the previous few seasons. And then we saw what Lazard did last year. So if Alan Lazard just keeps dropping the ball, then even his friendship with Aaron Rodgers isn't that strong. If he's dropping it and we think Brownlee is playing the way, playing to his potential, playing the way he did in college where he caught everything, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to say, yeah, let's keep running this guy out here who can't catch the football. So if Lazard struggles and Brownlee gets that spot, then it's all just going to come down to distribution. And I mean that in a good way because the Jets, let's face it, they've got a fair number of weapons now. Garrett Wilson, obviously going to get a ton of targets. We've talked about, I just mentioned a few minutes ago about how Aaron Rodgers loves throwing the ball shallow around the line of scrimmage. Well, what does that mean? That means Corley and Breece Hall, a ton of targets for them. Maybe even Xavier Gibson if he gets some run in the slot in certain situations. So there are enough players on this offense to spread the ball around that could keep Brownlee's production down if he wins the job over Lazard. But Mike Williams, who I didn't even mention because we were talking about the possibility of him missing time early on, which again we don't. I think early on Robert Saleh said the plan will be similar to what it was with Breece, right? Like he'll play, but he'll be limited in the first several weeks. So who's getting those reps, Brownlee or Lazard? And then is Brownlee getting targets while he's on the field? And we didn't even mention Conklin yet. And I would really hope to see some increased reps for Jeremy Ruckert. So a lot of options, a lot of directions for Aaron Rodgers to go. Aaron Rodgers, again, picked as a top 10 quarterback. And even if you want to say he's 10, 11, 12, whatever it may be, if he produces like a guy who's 10, 11, 12, then you're part of a team that was 31, 32 last year in production. And you're increasing by, 20 spots, which would be phenomenal. 8 would be, I can't remember the last time the Jets had a quarterback that played at that level. Maybe Pennington, maybe Vinny's big year, the 32 touchdown year, not 32, 28, whatever it was. And I know people talk about the Fitz year, but Fitz did a nice job, but that was largely on the receivers just playing out of their minds all season. I mean, look, Fitz did his job, but he wasn't playing at an elite level the way a guy like Pennington did when, his first full year, 22 touchdowns or I think at 18-2, what is it, as a starter? I know he had more picks than that, but some of those were in relief. But either way, the Jets haven't had a lot of elite quarterback play over the years. And now that's the plan this year. That's the expectation going forward. Even, despite having Hackett on board, we've all said it a million times, right? Aaron is going to be the guy who runs the offense. He's going to be the guy adjusting at the line. So Hackett can call whatever plays he wants, but Rodgers is going to get up to the line. He's going to put guys in position. So it'll be Aaron Rodgers' show on offense. On defense, again, and if you needed PFF to tell you that the Jets have the top trio or the top trio of corners in the NFL, you're just not paying attention. That's something you should know anyway if you're paying attention to football. Again, the praise for the linebackers. The upgraded offensive line with the addition of Hassan Reddick and Will McDonald. I mean, Will McDonald, essentially, with the increased playing time this year, it's almost like they've added another player. And I expect big things from them, especially with Quinnen in the middle. So no excuses for this team not to succeed. Again, on paper, I get it. but the games haven't started. So don't talk to me about tell me when they play the games, because we will. We'll talk about that. And if they come through and succeed, then people are going to grasp for reasons to not give the Jets credit. We know this to be the case. That's why a win right off the bat in San Francisco would be nice. That's a big ask. That's a huge ask. But you got an elite quarterback, and you got a high-end defense that should be able to pressure Brock Purdy. So we'll see how week 1 pans out. Week 1 is one day closer. Training camp just a couple weeks away now in Florham Park. So hopefully we'll have some Jet Nation coverage out there for that. Thanks for tuning in for this one. Aaron Rodgers, Quinnen Williams, Breece Hall, all named top 10 at their position by NFL executives. Hall and Williams, number 2, Rodgers, number 8, Tyron Smith, honorable mention among tackles. Have a good one, Jets fans. Wednesday night, myself, Dylan Terman, and Chris Schubert should be along to cover some more Jets news, some more Jets, go over the roster a little bit more, and get ready for training camp. Have a good one, Jets fans. And thank you